Hello everybody and welcome back to section 3 video 5 of your computer science tutorials. Mouthful. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about sort of how we're going to be sending messages to different objects in Unity. And for this example, we're going to be using a random a function that's going to generate a value in a randomized range, and that value is going to be sent to our enemy cube using the fireball spell that we created not too long ago. So if we open up Unity, I already have it open, so I'm just going to flip right over to it. And you see this cube right in front of us. Well, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the cube can be hurt. So the first thing we need to do for the cube to be hurt is we have to have some number that we can lower so it represents the cube being hurt. So the cube needs something like hit points or HP. So I'm going to create a quick HP script on the cube, and it's going to be a very simple script, and all that it's going to say is you're going to give a amount of HP to the to our cube or enemy in this case. So variable, and we'll call it HP, and we're going to save it as a float type, and we're going to set it to, we'll say 15, and then in function update what we're going to do is we're just going to check to see if HP is oh my gosh, I'm dying of typing here. If HP is less than or equal to 0, so if you have no more hit points left, then what we want to do is we want to destroy you, because, well, you should be dead. Simple as that. This dot oh my gosh, I'm blanking here. Oh my gosh, I'm spelling it wrong. Destroy, and I don't need this. And I write this dot game object and put a time. We'll say 0. Let's make it instant. And we actually don't need this there. That's a mouthful. This there. Yeah. Okay. So that's all you have to do, save that script. And if we were to save it now, you would see our cube has some hit points. Now what we need to do is we need to say that when we are casting this spell, we need to make it such that it'll damage the cube. And when it damages the cube, it's going to do it only when you hit the cube. So I'm not going to show you how to do collision detection yet. That's a little bit later, but that's basically how it's going to work. So I'm just tightening up here for a second. If we go into our script folder and we go into our fireball thing here, let's create a do damage script. And what we're going to do is this do damage script is going to go on to our fireball here. So add a component, add the do damage script, and we can open that script up. And we're going to use, so the first thing we want to do is, typically when you're fighting something, if you do the same damage every time, it can get a little bit boring. Now a variant, especially if you're trying to make like a 3D world kind of game or even a 2D space game, if you're doing the same damage every time, it gets a little predictive, routine. So what we're going to do is we're going to set a max damage and save it as a float value. We'll say 7. And we're going to make a minimum damage, so we won't be rude to our person. We'll still make them do something. and we'll set that equal to, we'll say 3. And all we have to do, actually, so we're checking for collision here, so I'm just going to write a click collision script. Collision, enter. This is a good prelog to collisions, which we'll be doing next chapter. It's the first thing we do, because as you see, they're very integral to a lot of stuff in programming, especially trying to program as I think, and it is killing me. It's especially in game development, because well, oh my gosh, I can't get this line right. .collider.name .gameObject not .gameObject .collider.gameObject no, that's it. And then we want to send message to that. Alright, so here's the important part. This send message. Everything before it is to reference what we're sending the message to. But if you already have that, then you can send the message to that game object. And so the message we want to send is apply damage, and we're going to give it a value. And the value is going to be random, and it's going to be between a range of our minimum damage and maximum damage. Close that, and then yes, that's it. Okay, so let me just explain this a little more. So what send message does, it's going to send the name of a function to call on another object. So let's say in cast fireball, this object was clone. I could send a message to clone right away from right here by doing clone.sendMessage, and that would send a message of some function you want the clone to call when it's first made. Now, I don't really need to do that. I need to apply damage. So we have it calling this function on our little enemy, but that function needs to exist. So we also need to define this function elsewhere for it to work. Otherwise, you'll get some freaky errors, and I have an error already. It is probably because I never closed my parentheses. That's what you get for programming on the fly. You make mistakes. And you see there's a range, and if we go to our cube, open up this HP script, which I'm going to do something to that in a minute. So now we need a function, and the function was called apply damage, same name, and it takes an input, and it's going to take a we're going to call it damage, and it's going to be a float value, and then the last thing we need to do is take HP and minus damage from HP. And an important thing to notice here, this damage right here, I can only reference it within these the curly braces here, and that's because this is within the scope. So for instance, if you don't typically do this, but if I made like an if statement and did like if h and then checked at this point, this is actually a smarter thing to do, because this runs every frame. And is that bad? Not necessarily, but it uses more data that we don't actually need to be using. So I'm just going to copy and paste that line there, and voila. But back to my original tangent. See, tangents are good sometimes. But back to my original tangent. Let's say we wanted to save something about this cube, like we want to save its HP, so we know so HP final. Let's say we're trying to save this, and we're gonna save it as a float for whatever reason. You want it. So we define it with inside of this if statement. But you see, the problem is that I'm going to get an error if I define it outside of this if statement, because it's only defined, and I actually need debug log and just stick that in there. Now I'm going to get an error because this is only defined within these curly braces, within this scope of the stack. As soon as I move up a stack or outside of the scope, this variable HP final no longer exists. So you're going to say I'm going to get a weird bug in the end, but it won't be detected because the compiler is not going to evaluate variable scope until it has an error dealing with it. And you see how it's 0 and it's not actually 0? See, that bug it shouldn't happen. Actually, wait a minute. That was weird. Okay, I actually lied just now. Variable scope is a little different in Unity. I'm rusty on my rules. Okay, so you can just forget the variable scope for now. But if you were using a different language, that rule would apply, and you could end up with an error. They must have just released like an edit on that. I don't know. I'm not sure. And that's it for this tutorial. So I hope you guys enjoyed.